I never thought that at 42 years old, running a multi-million-dollar industrial heating and cooling company, my biggest threat would not be a corporate rival trying to steal my commercial contracts. I never imagined it would be my own 31-year-old sister living rent-free in my $850,000 home. My older sister is just a useless servant. Her only job is serving me. Those exact words echoed in my mind, burning like acid in the center of my chest. When I heard them coming from her mouth, a mouth I had literally fed, a mouth that belonged to a person I had sheltered when she had absolutely nowhere else to go, something deep inside my soul shattered into a million jagged pieces. It was not a loud break. It was silent, heavy, and incredibly profound. For years, I had convinced myself that my daily sacrifices were simply acts of familial love. I thought taking care of my family, providing for them, paying every single bill, and letting them live in my home was what a good daughter and a good older sister was supposed to do. I swallowed my pride, I ignored the constant disrespect, and I worked my fingers to the bone while they rested in the comfort I provided. But hearing her say that to hundreds of thousands of strangers on the internet, hearing her reduce my entire existence to an unpaid, meaningless servant, woke me up in a way nothing else ever could. I was not a person to them. I was a resource. I was a utility. And they were draining me dry. You might wonder how a grown woman, a successful business owner who manages dozens of rough construction workers every day, ends up becoming a doormat in her own house. You might wonder how a family dynamic gets so incredibly toxic that an older sibling is treated worse than the dirt on the floor. Let me tell you exactly how it happens. It does not happen overnight. It is a slow, creeping poison that you do not notice until it has already infected your heart. And what I did next, the lesson I prepared for them in the dark of the night, is something they will carry with them to the grave. My alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. It always does. My body is so tuned to the grueling schedule of running commercial HVAC jobs that I barely need the alarm anymore. I rolled out of my small, cramped bed in the downstairs room, rubbing the exhaustion from my eyes. My hands felt rough, heavily calloused from years of wrenching steel pipes, hauling heavy equipment, and building my company from the ground up in an industry heavily dominated by men. I put on my gray work pants and my navy blue company polo, noticing a faint grease stain near the hem. I did not care. I had a massive installation at a downtown warehouse today, a contract worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I needed to be on site before the sun came up. I walked out into the hallway and stepped into the massive open-concept kitchen of my house. My house. The one I bought with cash, straight out of my business profits after years of living on instant noodles and saving every penny. But this morning, it did not look like my house. It looked like a college fraternity party had taken place and everyone had just abandoned the wreckage. Empty pizza boxes with dried grease stains were stacked haphazardly on the custom marble island I had specially imported from Italy. 2 empty bottles of imported wine, easily costing $150 each, were left tipped over near the expensive stainless steel sink. A sticky purple puddle of spilled wine was slowly dripping down the edge of the counter onto the pristine hardwood floor. Someone had thrown up near the sliding glass back patio door, and instead of cleaning it, they had just thrown one of my good white bath towels over it to hide the mess. I let out a slow, tired breath. The smell of stale alcohol and garlic filled the air. Delilah. My younger sister, Delilah, fancied herself a lifestyle influencer. She was a single mother to my 5-year-old nephew, Felix. When her baby daddy vanished 3 years ago, leaving her with massive credit card debt and an infant, she came crying to my doorstep. My parents, Vernon and Beatrice, who also lived with me, immediately demanded I take her in. She needed support, they told me repeatedly. She needed a village to help raise the boy. That was 3 years ago. Her so-called village consisted entirely of me paying for the electricity, the water, the groceries, the high-speed internet she used to upload her ridiculous videos, and cleaning up the disgusting messes she left behind after her weekly networking nights with other wannabe social media stars. I grabbed a mop, a bucket of hot water, and heavy-duty cleaner. I wiped down the marble counter, carefully scrubbing away the sticky wine. I threw away the expensive wine bottles, wondering how on earth she afforded them when she had not held a real, paying job in her entire adult life. I was on my hands and knees scrubbing the vomit off the floor when I heard soft footsteps descending the wooden stairs. My mother, Beatrice, walked into the kitchen wearing her plush pink robe. She did not look at the trash bags I had just tied up. She did not thank me for cleaning the horrific mess her youngest daughter had left behind. She simply stepped over the damp spot on the floor and poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot I had just finished brewing. "Maxine, make sure you make some scrambled eggs and toast for Felix before you leave for work," she said, her voice dry and demanding, not even making eye contact with me as she stared out the window. Delilah had a very late night shooting content with her friends. She needs to sleep in so her skin looks fresh for her brand deal video later today. She cannot be disturbed under any circumstances. I paused, the wet rag still tightly gripped in my hand. "Mom, I have to be at the construction site in exactly 20 minutes. I have a crew of 12 men waiting for me to unlock the security gate so they can start moving the heavy machinery. I cannot stay to cook breakfast." Beatrice sighed, letting out that dramatic, heavy sigh she always used to make me feel like I was the most selfish, unaccommodating person on planet Earth. "Maxine, you own the company. You are the boss. You can be late. Your sister is trying to build a real career in a very competitive industry. It is incredibly hard for her, raising a child all alone. You do not have a husband or children of your own, so you simply do not understand the pressure she is under. Just make the eggs. It takes 5 minutes. Do not be so difficult and stubborn all the time." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. I stood up, washed my hands vigorously in the sink, and started cracking eggs into a glass bowl. I was 42 years old, exhausted to my very bones, managing a multi-million-dollar business, and yet I was still treated like the obedient workhorse of the family. I made the breakfast, plated it nicely, poured a small glass of orange juice, and left it on the dining table for my nephew when he woke up. As I grabbed my heavy ring of keys to leave the house, I noticed the mail piled haphazardly on the entryway console table. I flipped through the envelopes quickly. Utility bills. Supermarket flyers. And then a thick, heavy envelope addressed to my father, Vernon. The return address in the corner immediately caught my eye. It was from one of the most prominent commercial real estate brokerage firms in the city. Why would my father be receiving formal legal mail from a high-end real estate broker? He had been completely retired for a decade, ever since his last business venture failed spectacularly and almost left them homeless. I frowned, holding the envelope up to the light, trying to see the documents inside. But the clock was ticking and my crew was waiting at the site. I tossed the thick envelope back onto the pile and walked out the door into the freezing morning air, locking it behind me. I had no idea that thin paper envelope was the first major warning sign. I had no idea they were already digging my grave. Driving my heavy-duty work truck down the empty, dark highway, watching the sun slowly rise over the jagged city skyline, my mind kept drifting back to that massive house. My house. Sometimes I truly felt like I was walking through a perfectly curated museum of my own pain and humiliation. Every room, every corner, every piece of expensive furniture held a distinct memory of exactly how little I mattered to the people who shared my blood. My parents had always heavily favored Delilah. She was the undeniable golden child, the pretty one, the one destined for a rich, successful husband and a glamorous, effortless life. I was always the sturdy one. The awkward tomboy who liked fixing broken air conditioners with my uncle in the garage instead of going to the mall. When I first started my business, they mocked it relentlessly. They said I would ruin my hands, destroy my femininity, and never find a decent man to marry me if I kept crawling through dirty ventilation shafts. But when their fragile world collapsed around them, I was the only one they could turn to for salvation. 7 years ago, Vernon made a terrible, impulsive investment. He gambled almost all their life savings on a strip mall development project on the edge of town that went completely belly up within a year. They were facing immediate foreclosure. The bank was circling. They were going to lose their modest home and literally end up on the street with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Delilah was too busy traveling the world on maxed-out credit cards, posting pictures from beaches in Europe to help them. So, I stepped in. I drained my personal savings accounts. I pulled a massive amount of money from my business operating capital, risking my own livelihood and the jobs of my employees, to hand my parents a cashier's check for $65,000 to cover their immediate mounting debts and secure a down payment on a new place. Eventually, I bought this massive house outright so they could have a safe, comfortable retirement. I gave them a solid roof. I gave them absolute peace of mind. And exactly how did they repay me for saving their lives? I thought about the invisible trophy sitting on my mental shelf, gathering dust. 2 years ago, the local Chamber of Commerce awarded me the highly prestigious Female Entrepreneur of the Year award. It was a huge, elegant gala. A strict black tie event at the nicest hotel downtown. I bought a beautiful, expensive evening dress for the very first time in years. I paid for professional hair and makeup. I reserved a premium table right near the stage for my family. I wanted them to see me shine, just once. I wanted them to be genuinely proud of the empire I had built with my bare hands, blood, and sweat. They never showed up. I sat at that beautifully decorated table completely alone, eating a dry, tasteless chicken breast, watching other winners hug their proud, crying parents and supportive spouses. I smiled for the cameras, gave my speech to a room full of strangers, and drove home in silence. When I got back to the house, my mother casually told me they had to go with Delilah to a late-night casting call for a reality television show. A cheap, dramatic show she never even got a call back for. Beatrice had sat on my couch, filing her nails, and said, "You know Delilah gets so incredibly nervous, Maxine. She really needed us there for moral support. You are so strong. You always handle things on your own so perfectly. You did not really need us to sit in a boring room and clap for a business award. I am strong. So I handle things entirely alone." That was the eternal curse of my life. Then came the ultimate, unforgivable insult. The master bedroom. When I first bought the house, I rightfully took the massive master suite on the second floor. It was beautiful, with a huge walk-in closet, a deep soaking tub, and a private balcony overlooking the landscaped garden. It was my only sanctuary after grueling 14-hour workdays dealing with clients and contractors. But when Delilah moved in, pregnant, crying, and claiming she had nothing, Beatrice and Vernon staged a full intervention in my own living room. "Maxine, she is bringing a fragile new life into this world," Vernon had said, sitting at my dining table with a stern, authoritative look. "She needs space. She needs the big bathroom for the baby tub so she does not hurt her back. She needs the massive walk-in closet for the crib and all the expensive baby supplies she has accumulated. You are just one single person. You do not need all that room just to sleep. It is incredibly selfish of you to keep the best room in the house when your sister is suffering so much." I fought them. For 2 agonizing hours, I fought them. I reminded them whose money bought the house. But the endless guilt trips, the dramatic crying from Delilah, the relentless accusations of me being a heartless, cold, jealous spinster finally wore me down. To buy some peace, I moved all my belongings down to the small, cramped guest room near the noisy laundry area on the first floor. I slept on a smaller bed, listening to the washing machine rattle the walls every night, while my sister took over my luxurious suite. She immediately filled it with bright ring lights, camera tripods, and racks of expensive clothes she bought online. I built the beautiful castle, but I was living in the dark dungeon. I gave, and they took and took, until I felt like a silent ghost haunting my own life. Success does not shield you from family trauma. Sometimes, it just makes you a much better, much wealthier target for them to bleed dry. Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own family? Like your massive achievements are totally ignored while your siblings' constant failures are celebrated and rewarded? Let me know in the comments below, because I know I cannot be the only one who has lived like this for so long. It was 1 in the afternoon. I was standing on the flat, tar-covered roof of a massive commercial building downtown, the blinding midday sun beating down on my hard hat. The noise of heavy power drills and metal ductwork being hammered into place was absolutely deafening. My phone vibrated intensely in my work pants pocket. I pulled it out, wiping the sweat from my forehead, fully expecting a frantic call from a supplier about a delayed parts shipment. It was a text message from Wallace. Wallace was my sharp corporate lawyer, but much more importantly, he was my oldest and best friend. We had known each other since our early college days. He handled all my complex business contracts, and he knew absolutely everything about my miserable family situation. He was the only person in my life who constantly and bluntly told me I needed to kick them all out onto the street. His message read, "You need to watch this video right now. Please do not break your phone in anger." Underneath the text was a direct link to a TikTok video. I walked over to the edge of the roof, seeking the small patch of shade cast by a large industrial ventilation unit, and clicked the link. The video popped up instantly. It was my sister, Delilah. She was sitting in the driver's seat of her car, wearing oversized designer sunglasses, sipping an iced coffee from an expensive cafe. The bold text caption on the screen read, "Setting boundaries with toxic family members to protect your peace." The video already had 150,000 views and thousands of comments. So many of you have been asking how I managed to be a dedicated single mom, run my business as a full-time content creator, and still have time for essential self-care, Delilah said directly to the camera, using that fake, breathy, overly sweet voice she reserved exclusively for her followers. Honestly, you guys, it is all about strict boundaries. You have to learn to delegate tasks to people who have the time. She paused, taking a slow, dramatic sip of her iced coffee, making sure the brand logo was facing the camera lens. I live with my older sister. And let me tell you, she is completely single, has no kids, and works in some dirty, masculine construction job. She literally has no life outside of work. So, I made it extremely clear that since I am doing the hard work of raising the next generation, she needs to step up and do her part. My older sister is basically my free maid. A useless servant, really, but she is good for cleaning up around the house. Her only real job is serving me and my son. She pays all the bills because, frankly, what else is she going to spend her money on? She has no one else. You have to train your family to support your dreams, guys. Do not let their jealousy hold you back from your true potential. She smirked at the camera. It was a cold, incredibly arrogant, deeply entitled smirk that made my stomach turn over. I slowly scrolled down to the comments section. My blood turned to solid ice in my veins. Yes, queen. Set those boundaries. Single moms deserve all the support. Your sister should be grateful she gets to help raise your beautiful kid. Ugh, single older sisters are always so jealous and bitter about everything. Good for you for putting her to work. She sounds like a total loser. At least she is useful for paying the bills. 150,000 people. 150,000 complete strangers validating her wild delusions, cheering her on, calling me a pathetic loser, an unpaid maid, a bitter spinster. They enthusiastically praised her honesty. They praised her toxic boundaries. My hands shook uncontrollably. I did not feel sad. I did not want to cry. I felt a slow, incredibly dark heat rise from the pit of my stomach to my throat. It was pure, unadulterated, blinding rage. I left the job site early, tossing my hard hat into the back of my truck. I drove home in a blinding fury, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were completely white. When I walked through the front door of my house, I found Delilah sitting comfortably on the expensive velvet sofa in the living room, casually scrolling through her phone. My mother was sitting right next to her, carefully peeling an apple and cutting it into perfect little slices for her. Delilah, I said. My voice was dangerously low, carrying a dangerous edge. She looked up, clearly annoyed by my interruption. What? You are home early. Can you please keep it down? I am trying to reply to my supportive comments. I walked over, stood over her, and held my phone right up to her face. The video paused perfectly on her smug, disgusting smile. What exactly is this? She blinked a few times, recognizing her own viral video. Oh, She rolled her eyes heavily and pushed my hand away with a manicured finger. It is just content, Maxine. Relax. You are being dramatic. Just content? I raised my voice, the boiling anger finally spilling over the edges. You called me a useless servant to the entire world. You told hundreds of thousands of people that my only purpose in life is to be your free, pathetic maid. I pay for the roof over your head. I pay for the food in your mouth. I clean up your disgusting vomit from the floor. Delilah stood up abruptly, crossing her arms defensively across her chest. You do not understand the social media algorithm. Controversy gets views and engagement. I am building a personal brand here. It is just a persona for the internet. It is not a big deal in real life. Why are you acting so crazy and unhinged over a stupid app? I am acting crazy? Beatrice stood up immediately, placing a protective, comforting hand on Delilah's arm. Maxine, lower your voice this instant. You are going to scare Felix if he wakes up. She is just trying to earn a living in a modern way. You are the older sister. You should be happy she is finally finding some success. You suffer a little bit of embarrassment for the family, so what? Why must you always make absolutely everything about you? I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman I had personally saved from total bankruptcy and homelessness. I looked at the sister I had fed, clothed, and housed for years. They were looking at me not with an ounce of guilt, but with pure, unadulterated annoyance. I was actively inconveniencing them by being rightfully angry that I was publicly humiliated and degraded. For a long, agonizing moment, the large living room was dead silent. I could hear the faint hum of the expensive refrigerator I bought. I looked at Delilah's incredibly arrogant face. I looked at Beatrice's deeply disapproving frown. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone at the wall. I felt a strange, chilling, terrifying calm wash over my entire body. I smiled. A small, tight, mechanical smile. You are right, I said softly, my voice devoid of any emotion. It is just content. I am sorry for overreacting. It will not happen again. I turned around, walked into the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and walked straight past them to my small, cramped room downstairs. I closed the door quietly behind me. I just smiled, sipped my coffee, and closed the app. They thought I was surrendering. They thought the old, reliable, pathetic doormat had just accepted her miserable place on the floor once again. They did not know I was reloading. That night, the air in the house felt completely different to me. The heavy scales had finally fallen from my tired eyes. I was no longer looking at my family with any lingering hope or a misplaced sense of duty. I was looking at them like a cold, calculating general assessing a hostile enemy encampment. It was past midnight. The house was finally quiet. I was sitting at my small, cramped desk in my downstairs bedroom, reviewing some complex financial spreadsheets for my company's upcoming quarter. On the corner of my desk sat the electronic baby monitor. I had bought it years ago for Felix's room so I could keep a careful eye on him when Delilah went out partying late into the night. Sometimes, the sensitive receiver picked up sounds from the main living room if the hallway doors were left open. I was just about to reach over and turn it off to get some sleep when I heard a distinct, static crackle. Then, voices. Low, hushed, conspiring voices coming through the tiny plastic speaker. It was Delilah and my parents. They were still awake, having a secret meeting in my living room. I turned the volume dial up slightly, pressing the monitor closer to my ear, my heart beginning to race. I am telling you, Dad, it is the absolute only way to rapidly scale the brand, Delilah was saying, her voice thick with greed and impatience. My followers are practically begging for exclusive merch. I want to launch a full cosmetic line. Vegan, cruelty-free, the whole high-end aesthetic. But the manufacturing plant in China needs a massive upfront deposit before they start production. And you are completely sure about this, sweetie? Vernon's voice sounded hesitant, slightly worried. That is a whole lot of money to risk. $200,000 is not a joke. I leaned forward in my chair, the breath catching in my throat. $200,000? Where in the world would they get that kind of money? It is an investment, Vernon, Beatrice chimed in. Her tone was sharp, authoritative, and utterly dismissive of his fears. Delilah has incredible potential. You saw her viral video today. She is practically famous now. We have to strike while the iron is hot or she will lose her momentum. But how do we actually get the money? Vernon asked. We have absolutely no credit left after the bankruptcy. The house, Dad, Delilah said slowly, speaking to him like she was explaining basic math to a slow toddler. We use the house. The commercial real estate broker I talked to said property values in this neighborhood have absolutely skyrocketed. The house is worth almost $900,000 now. We can easily take out a home equity line of credit for $200,000. My blood ran completely cold. They were casually talking about mortgaging my fully paid-off house behind my back. But the house is solely in Maxine's name, Vernon said, injecting a tiny bit of reality into the conversation. She will never, ever agree to take out a massive loan for a makeup company. You know exactly how incredibly tight-fisted she is with her money. She does not need to know what it is actually for, Delilah said smoothly, her voice dripping with malice. We tell her it is for tax optimization. A family trust to protect her assets. We get her to sign over the management rights of the property to you and Mom. The broker sent the formal paperwork today via courier. Once you two have the legal power of attorney over the estate, you can authorize the loan without her signature. The envelope. The thick, heavy envelope from the real estate firm I had seen on the table that morning. It all clicked together with sickening clarity. I held my breath. I desperately waited for my father to say no. I waited for my mother to say that was blatant fraud, that it was illegal, that it was stealing from their own daughter. I waited for just a single shred of human decency. Maxine is not going to like this if she finds out, Vernon muttered weakly. Oh, who cares what Maxine likes? Beatrice snapped. The pure venom in her voice was so intense it literally took my breath away. What does she even need this massive house for anyway? She is never going to get married. She works all day with those dirty, uneducated men. She is going to die entirely alone, Vernon. When she passes away, this house is going to legally belong to us and Delilah anyway. We are just accessing our future inheritance a little early to help the child who actually has a bright future. I sat there, frozen solid in the dim, flickering light of my small room. She is going to die entirely alone. We are just accessing our future inheritance. They did not just see me as a servant. They saw me as a walking, breathing ATM, a temporary placeholder for wealth that they truly believed was rightfully theirs. They were actively, maliciously plotting to steal equity from the home I bought with my blood, sweat, and tears, all to fund Delilah's narcissistic, impossible fantasies. And my own mother had casually dismissed my entire existence, essentially wishing for my lonely death so they could cash out and live in luxury. I did not cry. My tears had dried up years ago when I realized I was entirely on my own. I picked up my cell phone, opened the voice memo recording app, and placed it right next to the baby monitor speaker. I hit record and captured every single word. Just give her the papers tomorrow night at family dinner, Delilah instructed her parents. Tell her your old accountant friend said it will protect her business assets from corporate liability. You know she is paranoid about getting sued by angry clients. She signs complex contracts all day without reading the fine print if she trusts the person handing it to her. She trusts you, Dad. She will blindly sign it. I will talk to her, Vernon finally agreed, cementing his betrayal. It is for the best. Delilah needs this money. I stopped the recording. I saved the audio file to my phone, emailed it securely to myself, and uploaded it to a protected cloud server. I listened to the quiet, steady hum of the air conditioning unit outside my window. I looked at my calloused, scarred hands. They thought I was an absolute fool who signed things without reading. They thought I trusted them completely. They were right about exactly one thing. I used to trust them. But tomorrow, the rules of engagement were going to change permanently, and they were not going to survive the fallout. The next morning, I did not make breakfast for anyone. I left the house silently at 5 in the morning, drove straight to my company warehouse, handled the early morning dispatch for my construction crews, and then drove directly to a sleek, modern glass office building in the center of the financial district. I walked into Wallace's law office without an appointment. He was sitting at his large, polished mahogany desk, wearing a sharp gray designer suit, reviewing a thick stack of corporate contracts. He looked up, surprised by my sudden appearance, but when he saw the cold, dead look on my face, he immediately put his expensive pen down. "Maxine, what happened?" he asked, his aggressive lawyer mode instantly activating. I sat down heavily in the leather chair across from him, pulled out my phone, and hit play on the audio file. Wallace sat in total, stunned silence as the recording played loudly in his office. He listened to Delilah calmly explaining the complex fraud. He listened to my father's incredibly weak, pathetic protests. He listened to my mother's horrific, callous comment about me dying alone and them taking their unearned inheritance early. When the recording finally finished, Wallace closed his eyes and let out a long, heavy, furious breath. He took off his wire-rimmed glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose in disbelief. "I have seen a lot of incredibly ugly family disputes in my legal career, Maxine," he said, his voice tight with heavily controlled anger. "But this is highly predatory. They are actively conspiring to commit massive real estate fraud against you. Can they actually do it?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly steady. If I had signed that paper blindly tonight, could they have taken the loan? If it was a broad power of attorney and a deed transfer masked as a standard family trust? "Yes," Wallace said, leaning forward aggressively. "They could have easily leveraged the property, taken the $200,000 in cash, and left you entirely responsible for the massive debt. If you defaulted because you did not even know about the monthly payments, the bank would foreclose, and you would lose the house completely." I nodded slowly. The horrific reality of their absolute betrayal settled deep into my bones, replacing any remaining love with cold, hard steel. "Okay, so what is our immediate countermove?" Wallace smiled. It was a sharp, highly dangerous, predatory smile. I always loved that smile. It meant someone was about to get legally destroyed, and this time, it was my own family. First, we set up a real, legally binding trust. An ironclad, revocable living trust. You will be the sole grantor and the absolute sole trustee. The house will be legally transferred into the name of the trust immediately. Even if they forged your signature on a mortgage application tomorrow morning, no bank on earth would touch it because they are not listed as trustees. It locks the property down completely and permanently. "Do it right now," I said. "What else?" Wallace pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and uncapped his pen. "Second, we evict them." I shook my head firmly. I do not want to go through a messy, drawn-out, months-long court eviction process while living under the exact same roof with them. I want them out. Fast. They are legally considered month-to-month tenants, even without a formal written lease, simply because they have established residency by living there for years, Wallace explained, tapping his pen on the desk. However, because you live in the home with them and they pay absolutely no rent, we can issue a formal notice to terminate tenancy. Depending on our strict state laws, we can give them 30 days. But if we can legally prove hostile intent or a direct financial threat to the property, which this audio does, we can make it extremely uncomfortable for them to stay another night. "I want them gone this weekend," I said flatly, staring directly into his eyes. Wallace raised an eyebrow. "That is incredibly aggressive." "How?" While he was thinking, his desktop computer chimed loudly with an urgent email notification. He casually glanced at the screen, and his frown deepened dramatically. "Maxine, did you ask my financial assistant to pull your corporate credit card statements for the quarterly review early?" "Yes, yesterday afternoon." "Why?" Wallace clicked a few buttons rapidly, opening a secure PDF on his large monitor. "Because I am looking at your secondary account right now. The one you keep strictly for household emergencies and groceries." I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. "What is it?" "There is a massive pending charge from exactly 2 days ago. $4,500. To the Whispering Pines Luxury Resort and Spa." I stared at him. The breath entirely left my lungs. Delilah had access to that specific credit card in my name, strictly for buying groceries for Felix or paying for emergency plumbing repairs at the house if I was stuck on a job site. She had never abused it to this insane extent before. "She booked a vacation," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a truck. She used my emergency card to book a luxury spa trip for herself. Wallace turned the monitor around so I could see the screen clearly. A 3-day premium weekend package. Checking in this Friday afternoon. Checking out Sunday evening. A massive suite for 3 adults and 1 child. They were going on an extravagant luxury vacation on my dime, using my hard-earned money, while simultaneously plotting to steal the equity of my home. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was almost impressive in a sociopathic way. Wallace looked at me, carefully waiting for my emotional reaction. I looked back at the screen, staring intensely at that $4,500 charge. And then, surprisingly, I started to laugh. I laughed so hard my chest physically ached. Wallace looked genuinely concerned. "Maxine? Are you all right?" "Oh, they want a luxury vacation?" I gasped, wiping a tear of pure mirth from my eye. "They want a nice, relaxing weekend away from the useless, pathetic servant? What exactly are you thinking?" Wallace asked, leaning back in his expensive chair. I stood up, smoothing down my dusty work shirt. "Draft the trust documents today. I will sign them first thing tomorrow. Draft the formal eviction notices. And Wallace? Do you still have the contact number for that commercial moving company we used to clear out the old industrial warehouse last year?" Wallace's eyes widened drastically as he realized the sheer scale of my plan. A slow, wicked, highly entertained grin spread across his face. "I do. They're incredibly fast, highly discreet, and they happily work weekends for double pay. Book them for Saturday morning at 8. I am going to make absolutely sure that when my toxic family goes on vacation, they stay gone forever. The absolute hardest part of fighting a war is the agonizing waiting period before the first strike." For the next 3 long, painful days, I had to play the part of the oblivious, obedient, pathetic daughter and sister. I had to force myself to smile. I had to cook their elaborate meals. I had to swallow the bitter bile constantly rising in my throat every single time I looked at their greedy faces. Thursday night dinner was the greatest performance of my entire life. I roasted a whole chicken with vegetables. I carefully set the large dining table. Delilah sat scrolling aimlessly on her phone, completely ignoring her son Felix, who was aggressively mashing peas into the expensive wood of the dining table. Vernon and Beatrice exchanged nervous, incredibly guilty glances every few minutes. The thick legal envelope was sitting ominously on the kitchen counter. "Maxine," Vernon started, loudly clearing his throat. His hands were slightly shaky as he gripped his water glass. "You know, your mother and I have been thinking a lot about your future lately. You work so incredibly hard. We worry constantly about your business liabilities." "Oh?" I said, casually cutting a piece of roasted chicken, keeping my face perfectly neutral. "What exactly do you mean, Dad?" "Well, my old friend at the golf club, his accountant highly suggested setting up a family trust to protect your personal assets from corporate lawsuits. You own a massive construction company. If someone gets hurt on a job site, they could sue you and easily take this beautiful house away from us." He reached over and slid the thick, heavy envelope across the table toward me. We had a very good broker draft some preliminary papers just to see what it would look like. "It just assigns basic management rights to me and your mother. Just on paper, of course. Merely to shield the house under our name since we are retired and have absolutely no liability. You should really sign it. It is entirely for your own good." I looked down at the crisp white envelope. Inside was a legal document that would literally give them the unrestricted power to steal $200,000 and leave me in total financial ruin. I reached out slowly and pulled the envelope toward my plate. I did not open it. I looked up and smiled warmly at my sweating father. "That is so incredibly thoughtful of you, Dad. I really appreciate you looking out for me and my hard work. I am so swamped with the new massive contract downtown. I barely have time to think about asset protection and legal matters." Vernon let out a massive, highly visible sigh of relief. Beatrice smiled widely, reaching over to pat my hand affectionately. "We just want what is best for the family, sweetie. You know we love you." I will take this to the corporate office tomorrow morning, I said smoothly, casually tucking the envelope into my leather work bag. I will have my accountant review it quickly just to be safe, and I will sign it before the weekend begins. Delilah looked up from her phone, a greedy, triumphant glint in her eye. Great. So that is finally handled. Speaking of the weekend. She put her phone face down on the table, clasping her hands together in fake excitement. Mom, Dad, and I decided we really need some quality family bonding time. Felix has been so stressed lately, and I need a break from creating content. We booked a little weekend getaway to a rustic cabin upstate. Leaving tomorrow morning, coming back Sunday night. A rustic cabin upstate. That was a very funny way to pronounce the Whispering Pines luxury resort and spa. And they were using the $4,500 they brazenly stole from my emergency credit card to pay for it. That sounds absolutely wonderful, I said, taking a long sip of ice water to wash down the overwhelming disgust. You guys work so hard around here. You deserve a break. We would absolutely invite you, Maxine, Beatrice said, adopting a tone of fake, syrupy sympathy, but we know you have that big, dirty installation job this weekend. We did not want to pull you away from your important work and ruin your schedule. Right. My important work. The grueling work that pays for the expensive food in your mouths, the luxury clothes on your backs, and the massive roof over your heads. It is totally fine, I smiled, projecting pure innocence. I will really enjoy the quiet house. I can easily keep an eye on Felix if you want a real break from parenting. Oh no, Delilah said quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. We really want Felix to experience nature and bond with us. We are taking him. They did not want to leave the child with me because they desperately wanted to play happy, wealthy family at the luxury resort, ordering room service on my dime. Fine. That made my impending plan even easier to execute. Friday morning arrived with a chaotic rush. The house was a flurry of chaotic, noisy packing. Delilah was loudly hauling 3 massive, heavy designer suitcases down the wooden stairs, complaining about her back. Beatrice was barking frantic orders at Vernon to load the SUV properly so her expensive makeup bags wouldn't get crushed. I stood quietly by the front door in my heavy steel-toed work boots, holding my travel mug of black coffee. Bye, Auntie Max. Felix yelled, running up to tightly hug my legs. I knelt down and hugged him back just as tight. He was the only truly innocent one in this entire house. Have a fun trip, buddy. Be good for your mom and grandparents. Delilah strutted past me, wearing a massive, ridiculous sun hat and oversized designer sunglasses. Make sure you water my expensive fiddle-leaf fig plant in the master bedroom, she commanded without looking at me. And do not forget to take out the recycling. The bins are completely full from all my PR packages. I will take care of absolutely everything, Delilah, I promised. My voice was incredibly calm, almost soothing. Have a safe drive. Vernon patted me awkwardly on the shoulder. Did you sign those legal papers, kiddo? I patted my leather work bag. Dropping them in the mail today, Dad. Enjoy the trip. Do not worry about a thing. They piled excitedly into the SUV. The engine roared to life. I stood silently on the front porch, watching them back out of the long driveway. Delilah did not even look back once. Beatrice was already fiddling with the radio station. They drove down the quiet suburban street, turned the corner, and disappeared completely from sight. I stood there for a long, quiet moment. The morning air was crisp and cold. The massive house behind me was finally silent. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket and immediately dialed Wallace's direct number. He answered on the very first ring. Are they gone? They are gone, I said, a dark smile finally breaking across my face. Is the moving crew ready? Wallace chuckled deeply. They are parked exactly 2 streets over, waiting for the signal. I will send them in now. I hung up the phone. I looked down at the heavy brass keys resting in my rough palm. The keys to the front door. The locks that had kept my parasitic family safe and comfortable for years. What would you do if your family left for a luxury vacation funded entirely by your stolen money, while actively plotting to steal your house and hoping you die alone? Hit subscribe, because my answer involves a massive commercial moving truck, 5 burly men, and a whole lot of cold, hard justice. 10 minutes after my family's SUV disappeared down the street, a massive white commercial moving truck rumbled into my quiet suburban neighborhood. It parked right in front of my driveway, the heavy diesel engine humming loudly. 5 burly men in matching gray uniforms stepped out. They were led by a tall, heavily tattooed foreman named Marcus, whom I had hired last year to clear out an old industrial warehouse for my HVAC company. He was a man of very few words, but he worked with ruthless, military precision. I unlocked the front door and let them in. "Good morning, boss," Marcus said, taking off his work cap. "Wallace said you needed a full residential purge. What is staying and what is going?" I stood in the center of the massive, open-concept living room and took a deep breath. "I want you to go upstairs to the master bedroom," I instructed, pointing toward the sweeping staircase. "Everything in that room that belongs to my sister goes into the truck. Her clothes, her shoes, her camera equipment, her vanity. Everything. Then go into my parents' room down the hall. Clear out all their personal belongings, their furniture, their clothing. In the living room, take that massive velvet sofa, the 70-inch flat-screen television, and the expensive rugs. Leave the kitchen appliances, leave my nephew's room completely untouched, and leave my things." Marcus did not ask a single question. He just nodded, turned to his crew, and whistled. "You heard the boss. Let us get to work. Wrap it tight and move it fast." For the next 4 hours, my house transformed into a highly coordinated logistical operation. I stood in the kitchen, sipping my black coffee, watching as the physical manifestations of my family's entitlement were systematically carried out the front door. I watched 2 men carry out Delilah's massive, custom-built makeup vanity with the bright LED lights. I watched them carry out dozens of heavy designer suitcases filled with clothes she had bought using my money. I watched them haul out racks of expensive shoes, designer handbags, and professional lighting equipment. They even took her luxury skincare mini-fridge. I estimated they were carrying out easily $60,000 worth of luxury goods and electronics, all funded by my hard work and my stolen credit cards. It was incredibly therapeutic. With every heavy box that went out the door, I felt a physical weight lifting off my shoulders. The toxic, suffocating energy that had plagued my home for years was slowly being boxed up and removed. Once Delilah's things were gone, they started on my parents' room. Vernon's golf clubs, Beatrice's expensive jewelry boxes, their heavy mahogany bed frame that I had paid for. Out it went. Down the stairs, through the door, into the cavernous belly of the moving truck. When the master bedroom was finally completely empty, looking vast and echoing without Delilah's hoarded junk, I walked downstairs to my cramped, tiny guest room near the laundry area. I started grabbing my own meager belongings. A few boxes of work clothes, my simple bed frame, my modest dresser. I carried them upstairs, step by step, and placed them right in the center of the master suite. I walked over to the sliding glass doors that led to the private balcony. I opened them, letting the crisp morning breeze wash over my face. I was finally back in my own room. The dungeon days were officially over. By 1 in the afternoon, the moving truck was packed to the absolute brim. Marcus handed me a heavy clipboard with a detailed, itemized inventory list of every single box and piece of furniture they had taken. "Where is it all going?" Marcus asked, clicking his pen. "Storage unit number 402, at the secure facility 15 miles across town," I said, handing him the gate access code. "The first month is already paid in full. Leave the keys to the padlock with the facility manager under the name Vernon." "You got it, boss," Marcus said. He tipped his cap, climbed into the massive truck, and drove away, taking my family's entire life with him. But I was not done. Not even close. I had scheduled a professional locksmith to arrive at 2. He was a quiet, older man who did not ask any questions about why I needed the locks changed so urgently on a Saturday afternoon. I did not just ask for standard locks. I had him install top-of-the-line, commercial-grade, solid gold steel core deadbolts on every single exterior door of the house. The hardware and labor cost me $800, but it was the best money I had ever spent in my entire life. When the locksmith finished and handed me the heavy, shiny new keys, I locked the front door from the inside and leaned my back against the solid wood. The house was incredibly quiet. It echoed. The living room looked bare without the massive velvet sofa and the giant television. But it looked clean. It looked like a blank slate. It finally looked like mine. I spent the rest of the weekend cleaning. I scrubbed the floors, I wiped down the counters, I washed the windows. I did not do it out of obligation or fear of my mother's nagging. I did it because I loved my home, and I was preparing it for a new era of absolute peace. By Sunday afternoon, my hands were raw, but my spirit was soaring. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, poured myself a large mug, and pulled a simple wooden chair into the entryway, facing the solid front door. I sat down. I waited. The trap was fully set, the bait was taken, and the predators were about to walk right into a reinforced steel wall. They thought I was just a useless servant, meant to clean up their messes and fund their lavish lifestyles while they plotted my financial ruin. They thought they could leave me behind while they enjoyed a luxury spa weekend on my stolen credit card. What happens when the servant suddenly becomes the master of the castle? You are about to find out, and I promise you, it is not going to be pretty. Sunday afternoon arrived with dark, heavy clouds rolling over the neighborhood, threatening a late summer thunderstorm. I was still sitting in my wooden chair in the empty entryway, my hands folded neatly in my lap, listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Wallace had arrived an hour ago through the back door. He was currently sitting in the kitchen, completely out of sight from the front windows, drinking a glass of water and organizing a thick stack of legal documents in his expensive leather briefcase. At exactly 4:30 in the afternoon, a large black SUV pulled into my driveway. I stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles out of my dark gray work pants. I walked over to the front window and peered through the blinds. My family was back from their luxurious, stolen vacation. Delilah stepped out of the passenger side, looking incredibly relaxed. She was wearing a plush white spa sweater and holding a green detox smoothie. Beatrice and Vernon climbed out, stretching their legs, looking refreshed and sun-kissed. They opened the trunk and started pulling out their expensive overnight bags. Felix was running around on the front lawn, chasing a butterfly, completely oblivious to the massive storm that was about to hit this family. I watched as Vernon grabbed his heavy set of keys from his pocket. He walked up the concrete steps to the front porch, followed closely by Delilah, who was busy typing furiously on her phone, likely posting photos of her fake, wealthy lifestyle. I stood perfectly still on the other side of the heavy wooden door. I heard the metallic clink of Vernon's old key sliding into the lock. I heard him try to turn it. It did not budge. I heard him jiggle the handle, forcefully pushing his shoulder against the heavy wood. Nothing happened. The gold steel core deadbolt held firm, completely unyielding. "What is wrong with the door, Dad?" Delilah's annoyed voice filtered through the wood. "Just open it. I need to use the bathroom and check my ring light." "The key is not turning," Vernon muttered, sounding confused. He pulled the key out, looked at it, and shoved it back in, twisting it harder. "It must be jammed." "Maxine!" he yelled, banging his fist heavily against the door. "Maxine, open the door. The lock is stuck." I did not move. I let them stand out there in the rising humidity for 2 full minutes. I listened to Beatrice complain about the heat. I listened to Delilah whine about her smoothie melting. Finally, I reached out, unlocked the heavy deadbolt with a loud, satisfying click, and slowly pulled the front door open. I stood directly in the threshold, blocking the entrance. I did not smile. I did not greet them. I just stared at them with cold, dead eyes. Vernon let out a frustrated sigh, wiping sweat from his brow. "Finally. What were you doing in there?" "The lock is completely busted, Maxine. You need to call a repairman tomorrow morning. Move out of the way, your mother is tired." He tried to step past me into the house. I firmly planted my heavy work boot across the doorway and put my hand squarely on his chest, stopping him dead in his tracks. "The lock is not broken, Vernon," I said, my voice dangerously calm and flat. "The lock is brand new. And you do not have the key." Vernon blinked, stepping back in absolute confusion. What are you talking about? Why would you change the locks? Delilah pushed past her father, glaring at me with pure, unadulterated entitlement. Maxine, stop being weird and let us inside. I have a massive headache and I need to lie down on the sofa. She shoved past my arm and aggressively barged into the entryway. But she only took 3 steps before she completely froze. Her expensive iced smoothie slipped from her manicured fingers and crashed onto the hardwood floor, splattering green liquid everywhere. Where is it? Delilah gasped, her voice instantly rising to a high, hysterical pitch. Vernon and Beatrice pushed inside behind her, and they too froze in absolute shock. They stared at the massive, echoing living room. The giant velvet sofa was gone. The 70-inch television was missing from the wall. The expensive rugs, the side tables, the decorative lamps. All gone. What happened? Beatrice screamed, clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. Were we robbed? Maxine, did you let someone rob our beautiful house while we were gone? I did not let anyone rob the house, I said, slowly closing the heavy front door behind them and locking the deadbolt with a loud, definitive click. Delilah suddenly snapped out of her shock and sprinted wildly up the stairs. A few seconds later, a blood-curdling, hysterical scream echoed from the second floor. My things! Delilah shrieked, her heavy footsteps pounding frantically as she ran back down the stairs, her face red with pure panic. My vanity is gone. My designer clothes. My bags. My entire room is completely empty. What did you do, you crazy psycho? Where is my stuff? I crossed my arms over my chest, standing tall and immovable. Your things, along with all of Mom and Dad's things, are currently sitting in storage unit number 402 at the facility 15 miles across town. Storage unit? Vernon yelled, his face turning a dark, dangerous shade of purple. You packed up our entire lives and put them in a dirty storage unit? Who gave you the right to touch our property? The first month's rent is already paid in full, I continued smoothly, completely ignoring his outrage. After 30 days, the facility charges $150 a month. If you do not pay it, they will auction off your precious designer bags to the highest bidder. I suggest you go retrieve them quickly. You cannot do this. Delilah screamed, lunging toward me with her hands curled into claws. We live here. This is our house. You are just a jealous, bitter, useless maid who wants to ruin my life because you have absolutely nothing. I did not flinch. I did not move an inch. Vernon stepped forward, his fists clenched tight at his sides. Maxine, I do not know what kind of sick, twisted mental breakdown you are having, but you are going to call those movers right now and have everything brought back. Or, so help me God, I will slap some respect into you. He actually raised his right hand, stepping aggressively into my personal space, fully intending to strike me across the face. Before I could even react to defend myself, a sharp, incredibly authoritative voice echoed from the kitchen doorway. I highly recommend you lower your hand, Vernon, unless you want to spend the rest of your luxurious weekend sitting in a dirty holding cell for domestic assault. Vernon froze, his hand still suspended in the air. Wallace stepped out of the shadows of the kitchen, looking like a total legal shark in a sharp suit, holding a very thick, intimidating file of legal documents. He walked calmly to my side, staring down my father with eyes like shards of ice. Who the hell are you? Vernon demanded, slowly lowering his shaking hand. I am Maxine's corporate attorney, Wallace said smoothly, adjusting his glasses. And we need to have a very serious family meeting in the living room. Right now. They thought I was alone. They completely forgot that I run a successful business in a harsh man's world. I know exactly how to bring backup, and I know exactly how to destroy an enemy. The atmosphere in the empty living room was incredibly tense. Without the velvet sofa, my family was forced to stand awkwardly in the center of the hardwood floor like guilty prisoners waiting for a judge's verdict. Felix, sensing the heavy tension, was quietly sitting in the corner, playing with a small toy truck I had given him. Wallace stood next to me, opening his thick leather briefcase and pulling out several heavily stapled documents. Let us get straight to the point, Wallace said, his voice echoing in the empty room. His tone was strictly professional, absolutely devoid of any warmth. You are probably wondering why your personal belongings have been legally removed from the premises. You cannot do this. Delilah shrieked again, pointing a shaking finger at me. We have squatters' rights. We have tenant rights. I will sue you for illegal eviction. I have followers. I will ruin your dirty construction business online. Wallace did not even look at her. He pulled a single sheet of paper from his file and held it up. Before we discuss housing rights, Delilah, Wallace said coldly, let us discuss credit card fraud and grand larceny. Delilah's mouth snapped shut. The angry red color in her cheeks instantly drained away, leaving her looking pale and sick. I have here the official banking statements for Maxine's secondary corporate emergency credit card, Wallace continued, waving the paper. 3 days ago, a charge was made for exactly $4,500 to the Whispering Pines Luxury Resort and Spa. A card that you, Delilah, were only authorized to use for extreme household emergencies. That constitutes felony credit card fraud. Beatrice gasped loudly, turning to stare at her daughter. Delilah, you told us that trip was fully sponsored by a brand deal. You told us they invited you. She lied to you, Mom, I said quietly, speaking for the first time since Wallace took over. Just like she lies to the internet. Just like you all lie to me. Vernon swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. Now, wait a minute, Maxine. Let us not get the law involved over a simple misunderstanding about a credit card. We are a family. We can work this out internally. We will pay you back. Pay me back? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Pay me back with what, Dad? The money you were actively planning to steal from the equity of my home? Vernon's entire body went completely rigid. He looked like a man who had just stepped on a live landmine. What are you talking about? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I swiped the screen, connected it to the small Bluetooth speaker I had left on the kitchen counter, and hit play on the voice memo. The audio filled the room, loud and crystal clear. We use the house, Dad. We can easily take out a home equity line of credit for $200,000. I watched my father physically shrink. His shoulders slumped, and he stared at the floor, unable to make eye contact with anyone. She does not need to know what it is for. We get her to sign over the management rights. Delilah bit her bottom lip so hard I actually saw a drop of blood bloom on the skin. She crossed her arms tightly, trying to look defiant, but her eyes were darting around the room in absolute panic. She is going to die entirely alone, Vernon. When she passes, this house is going to belong to us anyway. We are just accessing our future inheritance a little early. The recording ended. The silence that followed was so profound, so incredibly heavy, you could have heard a pin drop on a carpet. Beatrice's knees literally gave out. She collapsed onto the hardwood floor, sitting awkwardly with her legs splayed, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. Maxine, honey, please. It sounds bad out of context, but we were just brainstorming. We would never actually hurt you. Do not insult my intelligence, Mother, I snapped, my voice finally cracking like a whip. You sat in my house, eating food I paid for, and casually discussed my lonely death so you could steal $200,000 to fund her pathetic makeup brand. You handed me a fraudulent power of attorney document and smiled in my face. Vernon stepped forward, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. Maxine, the document, the trust, it was just an idea. A misunderstanding. You did not sign it, right? So no harm done. We can just forget this ever happened. Wallace let out a sharp, mocking laugh. He pulled a massive, legally bound document with a gold seal from his briefcase and slammed it down onto the nearby kitchen counter. You are right about one thing, Vernon, Wallace said, his eyes narrowing dangerously. She did not sign your fraudulent papers. She signed these. This is an ironclad, revocable living trust. This property is now fully legally transferred into this trust, of which Maxine is the sole grantor and the sole trustee. Your fake power of attorney is completely worthless. You have absolutely zero legal claim, zero equity, and zero rights to this property. Vernon stared at the thick legal document as if it were a venomous snake about to strike him. Furthermore, Wallace continued, pulling out 3 smaller, official-looking envelopes. Since you do not pay rent, do not have a lease, and have demonstrated hostile, predatory financial intent against the legal homeowner, you have forfeited any standard tenant protections. He walked forward and shoved 1 envelope into Vernon's chest, dropped 1 on the floor next to Beatrice, and handed the last one to a trembling Delilah. These are formal, legally binding notices of immediate eviction due to hostile threat, Wallace stated firmly. You are officially no longer family members staying out of the goodness of her heart. From this exact second forward, you are classified as illegal trespassers. If Maxine dials 911 right now, the police will forcibly remove you from the premises in handcuffs. Delilah looked down at the envelope in her hands. Her arrogant, smug influencer persona completely shattered. She looked like a terrified, trapped rat. She slowly looked up at me, tears of genuine panic finally welling in her eyes. Maxine, please. Where are we supposed to go? We have no money. Our stuff is in a storage unit. Please, you cannot throw your own family out onto the street. I looked at the 3 of them. The people who had used me, degraded me, and plotted to rob me blind. I held all the cards. I had absolute, total power over their immediate survival. I looked over at little Felix, who was quietly playing with his truck, oblivious to the fact that his mother had just destroyed his life. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I was not going to be a victim anymore, but I was also not going to let a 5-year-old child sleep in a car. I stepped forward, looking down at my weeping mother, my defeated father, and my terrified sister. You are not going to the street, I said slowly, measuring every single word. You are going to stay right here. They all looked up at me, a massive wave of hopeful relief washing over their faces. But I continued, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You are no longer the masters of this house. If you stay under my absolute, non-negotiable conditions. And if you break even a single rule, Wallace has the police on speed dial. The desperate relief on their faces was absolutely pathetic to witness. Just minutes ago, they were arrogant predators plotting to steal $200,000 from me. Now, faced with the brutal reality of homelessness, they were practically crawling on their knees. Oh, thank God, Beatrice sobbed loudly, scrambling up from the hard floor to try and grab my hand. Thank you, Maxine. You have always been the good one. The responsible one. I knew you would not abandon your family. We are so sorry. It was Delilah's fault. She manipulated us. She pressured your father into getting those real estate papers. Beatrice instantly threw her golden child completely under the bus the second her own comfort was threatened. The alliance of toxic abusers was finally fracturing under pressure. Mom, Delilah screamed, her eyes widening in absolute betrayal. You agreed with me. You said Maxine was going to die alone anyway. I do not want to hear another word from either of you, I barked, my voice echoing loudly in the empty living room. Both women instantly snapped their mouths shut, looking at me with genuine fear. Delilah aggressively wiped her nose, grabbing Felix and pulling him roughly against her side, using the small, confused child as a literal human shield. You are just trying to control us. She cried out, her narcissistic defense mechanisms kicking back in. You are on a massive power trip. You would really threaten to kick your innocent little nephew out into the cold streets just to prove a point? I walked slowly across the room until I was standing inches from Delilah's face. She shrank back against the wall. I gently reached out, took Felix by his small hand, and pulled him away from her trembling grip. I guided him toward the kitchen counter. Hey buddy, I said softly, my voice instantly changing to a warm tone. Wallace brought some chocolate chip cookies in his briefcase. Why do you not go sit with him and have a snack while the adults talk? Felix's eyes lit up at the mention of cookies, and he happily trotted over to Wallace, who gave him a kind smile and a wrapped cookie. I turned back to Delilah, the warmth instantly vanishing from my face, replaced by cold, hard steel. Do not ever, in your entire life, use that child as a weapon against me again, I whispered dangerously. Felix stays because I love him. Mom and Dad stay because I am not a monster. But you? You are currently breathing my air purely on borrowed time. I walked back to the center of the room, facing the three of them. Here are the new rules of this household, I announced clearly. Rule number 1. Mom, Dad, starting on the 1st of next month, you will pay me $1,200 in rent. Every single month. Vernon gasped, his eyes bulging. Maxine, we only get our fixed Social Security pensions. That is almost half our monthly income. Then you better start clipping coupons, Dad, I replied coldly. Because if you do not pay, you can take your pension and try to find an apartment in this city. Good luck with your ruined credit score. Vernon swallowed hard and nodded weakly. Rule number 2, I continued, looking directly at Delilah. The corporate emergency credit card is completely canceled. In fact, all the secondary cards attached to my accounts have been destroyed. You have zero access to my money. Furthermore, Delilah, you will repay the $4,500 you stole for your spa vacation. I do not have that kind of money. Delilah wailed, tears streaming down her face, destroying her perfect makeup. You know I am flat broke. Which brings me to rule number 3, I said, crossing my arms. You are going to get a job. A real, physical, tax-paying job. I do not care if you are flipping burgers, folding clothes at the mall, or scrubbing toilets. You will work, you will earn a paycheck, and you will pay me back every single cent. If you do not have proof of employment within exactly 14 days, you will pack your bags and leave this house permanently. Delilah looked like she was going to vomit. But my content, my followers. I cannot work a minimum wage job. It will completely ruin my influencer brand. Your brand is a lie, I stated bluntly. You are a broke, unemployed squatter living off your sister. The illusion is over. They stood there in silence, completely broken, stripped of their entitlement, and forced into submission by the harsh reality of their own actions. I had successfully reclaimed my absolute power. I was no longer the invisible scapegoat. I was the master of the house, the sole financial provider, and the strict enforcer of consequences. But I was not quite finished. I had one final, crucial piece of business to attend to. I turned my attention back to Delilah, who was leaning heavily against the wall, sobbing quietly into her hands. There is one final condition for you, Delilah, I said, my voice dropping lower. She looked up, her eyes red and puffy, terrified of what I was going to demand next. What? What else could you possibly want from me? You already took my furniture, my money, and my dignity. You took my dignity first, I reminded her coldly. You went on the internet, to hundreds of thousands of people, and called me a useless servant. You mocked my life. You laughed while strangers degraded me. You built your entire fake, boundaries persona by stepping heavily on my neck. I stepped closer to her. So, your final condition is going to be paid in your absolute favorite currency, I said softly. Public humiliation. What does that mean? She whispered, panic flooding her eyes again. I smiled. It was not a kind smile. You are going to find out tomorrow morning. There is a beautiful, deeply poetic justice in how the internet works. It can build a person into a god overnight, and it can tear them down into absolute dust in mere seconds. Delilah was about to learn that brutal lesson firsthand. What my sister did not know, what she could not possibly have known, was that my commercial HVAC company services some very high-profile clients in the city. A few months ago, I had personally overseen a massive, complex emergency air conditioning repair at a luxury penthouse downtown. The owner of that penthouse was a woman named Miriam. Miriam was a major, highly respected lifestyle and business influencer. She had over 3 million dedicated followers across her platforms. She was known for her brutal honesty, her business acumen, and her absolute zero-tolerance policy for fake, toxic influencers who lied to their audiences. When I fixed her AC in the middle of a brutal heatwave, we had a long, friendly conversation. We connected. She respected my hard work in a male-dominated field, and we followed each other on social media. When I saw Delilah's viral video calling me a useless servant, I did not just send it to my lawyer. I sent a direct message to Miriam. I briefly explained the reality of the situation, that the girl in the video was my sister, that she lived completely rent-free in my house, that she had stolen my credit card, and that she was currently plotting to commit real estate fraud against me. I sent her a few undeniable receipts, including the property records proving I own the house alone. Miriam was absolutely disgusted. She asked if she could use the information to expose Delilah's toxic, predatory behavior to her massive audience. I told her to unleash hell. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, Miriam dropped a highly edited, heavily researched Stitch video. The video started with Delilah's smug face saying, "My older sister is basically my free maid. A useless servant, really." Then it cut sharply to Miriam, sitting in her beautiful, air-conditioned penthouse, looking furious. "Let us talk about boundaries," Miriam started, her voice dripping with intense sarcasm. This creator, Delilah, claims she is setting boundaries with her toxic, useless sister. But let me tell you the actual, verified truth about this situation. That useless servant sister? She owns a highly successful, multi-million-dollar construction business. She bought the massive house Delilah is filming in with her own hard-earned cash. Delilah pays absolutely zero rent. Delilah does not have a real job. And the designer clothes Delilah is wearing in this video? They were bought using her older sister's stolen emergency credit card. The video went on for 3 devastating minutes. Miriam systematically dismantled Delilah's entire fake aesthetic. She exposed the hypocrisy of calling a hardworking, supportive family member a servant, while literally leeching off their bank account. She called out the toxic trend of influencers weaponizing therapy speak like boundaries to justify being lazy, abusive, and financially predatory. Miriam's video exploded. Because of her massive reach and the highly dramatic nature of the story, the algorithm pushed it everywhere. Within 6 hours, it had 3 million views. The fallout was instantaneous, brutal, and incredibly satisfying to watch. I sat at my desk in my office, watching the chaos unfold on my phone. The flying monkeys, Delilah's loyal, toxic fans who had praised her bravery just days ago, completely turned on her with vicious speed. The comment section on Delilah's original video turned into an absolute bloodbath. "You are a massive fraud and a parasite. Pay your sister back, you thief." Imagine calling the woman who puts a roof over your head a useless maid. "You are disgusting. I hope she kicks you out on the street." Cancelled. By noon, Delilah's phone was ringing nonstop. 2 small, boutique skincare brands that had sent her PR packages publicly announced they were cutting all ties with her and formally demanding their free products back. Her follower count started dropping by the thousands every single hour. When I drove home that evening, I found Delilah sitting on the floor of the empty living room, her phone in her lap, openly hyperventilating. She looked absolutely horrific. She had not showered, her hair was a messy rat's nest, and her eyes were swollen shut from hours of hysterical crying. Beatrice was fluttering around her helplessly, unsure of how to comfort the golden child whose entire world had just collapsed. "You did this," Delilah choked out, glaring at me with pure hatred as I walked through the door. "You ruined my entire life. You told Miriam. You sent her my private information. My brand is completely destroyed." "Your brand was built entirely on lies and my money," I said coldly, placing my keys on the counter. "The internet just finally met the real you." I pulled out my phone and checked the time. "You have exactly 1 hour, Delilah." "1 hour for what?" She sobbed wildly. "1 hour to film an apology video," I demanded, crossing my arms. "You are going to sit on this empty floor, without a ring light, without makeup, and you are going to tell your remaining followers the absolute truth. You will admit that you are an unemployed freeloader. You will admit that I pay for everything. You will publicly apologize for calling me a servant, and you will explicitly state that I am the only reason you and your son are not currently living in a homeless shelter." "I cannot do that," she shrieked, clawing at her hair. "It will be on the internet forever. I will never recover from the humiliation. If you do not post it in exactly 1 hour," I said, turning my back on her to walk toward the kitchen, "I will have Wallace call the police and officially file the felony grand larceny charges for the $4,500 you stole." You can try building a lifestyle brand from a state prison cell. The choice is entirely yours. 45 minutes later, I received a notification on my phone. Delilah had posted a new video. There were no filters. There was no upbeat music. It was just her, sitting on the bare hardwood floor, looking totally destroyed, tears streaming down her face. And for the first time in her entire adult life, she told the brutal, humiliating truth to the world. She admitted she was a freeloader. She admitted she lied. She begged for forgiveness. She cried for real, not because she was genuinely sorry for hurting me, but because she had lost the only thing she truly cared about, her fake online clout. I locked my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and smiled. The lesson was finally complete. 1 month later. The atmosphere in the massive, $850,000 house had changed entirely. It was no longer a toxic battlefield or a museum of my profound pain. It was, for the very first time since I bought it, a quiet, functional, highly respectful home. The brutal reality of the new rules had finally set in for my family. Delilah lasted exactly 2 weeks working as a barista at a local coffee shop. The physical labor of standing on her feet for 8 hours a day, dealing with rude customers, and making minimum wage completely broke her fragile ego. When her manager yelled at her for being late, she had a massive meltdown, quit on the spot, and walked out. True to my word, I did not give her a second chance. That same night, I handed her 2 large trash bags and told her to pack whatever was left of her clothes. She cried, she begged, she promised to find another job, but my heart was completely hardened to her manipulation. She moved out the next morning, renting a tiny, cramped, deeply depressing apartment in a bad part of town using a high-interest payday loan. The most painful part was that she left little Felix behind. She claimed her new studio apartment was not a suitable environment for a growing child, but the harsh truth was that she simply did not want the heavy responsibility of raising a boy without my money to fund her convenience. Felix now stays with me and my parents. I converted Delilah's old empty room into a proper playroom for him. I make sure he goes to a good preschool, I buy his clothes, and I read him stories at night. He is happy, safe, and completely shielded from his mother's toxic narcissism. My parents, Vernon and Beatrice, have undergone a drastic, almost unbelievable transformation. The sheer terror of being evicted and losing their comfortable lifestyle finally forced them to respect the boundaries I established. On the first day of the month, Vernon silently places an envelope containing $1,200 in cash on the kitchen counter for rent. He does not complain. Beatrice, who used to treat me like the hired help, now spends her days meticulously cleaning the house, doing the laundry, and cooking dinners. Whenever I walk into a room, they immediately quiet down and look at me with a mixture of deep apprehension and forced politeness. They do not nag me about getting married. They do not ask me for money. They simply do their chores and stay completely out of my way. It is strange, living with parents who are terrified of you. The unconditional love I always desperately craved from them is clearly never going to materialize. They do not love me, they simply fear the immense power I hold over their survival. But after years of being exploited, used, and degraded, I have realized that I strongly prefer their terrified respect over their fake, toxic affection. Tonight, I am sitting alone on the balcony of my massive master suite. The cool night air is blowing gently through the trees in the garden. I am holding a glass of expensive red wine, the kind Delilah used to steal from my cabinet, and I am looking out over the quiet suburban neighborhood. I am 42 years old. I am single. I work incredibly hard in a dirty, demanding industry. I do not have a picture-perfect, glamorous lifestyle to post on the internet. But I have my absolute peace. I am no longer the invisible scapegoat shrinking into the corners of my own home. I am the master of my castle. I took my power back, I protected my hard-earned assets from absolute ruin, and I systematically dismantled the people who tried to destroy my life for their own selfish gain. Sometimes, in the quiet moments of the night, when the house is totally silent, a small, lingering doubt creeps into the back of my mind. I think about my sister, sitting alone in a dirty, cramped apartment, her reputation completely destroyed, alienated from her own young son. I think about my elderly parents, handing over half their meager pension just to keep a roof over their heads, walking on eggshells in the house they once ruled with arrogance. I sip my wine and watch the stars. I have my house back, my peace back, and my young nephew is completely safe from the chaos. But my parents still look at me with genuine fear, not love. Was I too harsh? Should I have shown more mercy to my own blood? Should I have given my younger sister one more second chance to prove she could change, instead of publicly destroying her life and forcing her out into the cold? Tell me exactly what you think in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you truly believe that respecting yourself, setting ironclad boundaries, and protecting your peace is vastly more important than keeping a toxic, abusive family together, please do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one.